Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see where you are all calling in from today. Welcome. We are going to get started in just a moment. We have many people who are attending today. We're delighted that so many of you could make yourselves available. We will get started in just a moment.
Just to folks that are organizing this. Well, first of all, hello to everyone who is joining us today. But, oh, there's Andy. I was going to say we are missing a guest, Andy, but we've got Andy. Great to see you, Andy. And you can see everyone who's joining from across the country. Hello from the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples right in Ottawa. That's where I am.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I think that we are ready to get going. We have more folks who are still entering the room, but we have quite a wonderful lineup today. So let's get going. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to this webinar on transforming public spaces to respond to COVID-19. I am joining you today from the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. My name is Andrea Dix, and I'm the president of Community Foundations of Canada. We are working alongside other partners as part of the Healthy Communities Initiative. Before we start today's session, I have been asked to go over a few housekeeping details. So first, a friendly Zoom reminder. You can see and hear us, but we can't see or hear you. If you have questions or any challenges throughout the session, please pop them into the chat box. We have an amazing team who is available to answer your questions. We will also be incorporating your questions into the panel discussion that is happening later in the session. We are looking forward to an interesting and constructive dialogue today. On that, an important note. We will not tolerate any hate speech or abusive language in the chat box. If you violate these rules, you will be removed from the webinar. This session is being recorded, and you will be able to view it on our website after the session. This session is also available in English, French, American Sign Language, and Quebec Sign Language. To access the French and English interpretation, you will see at the bottom of your Zoom page a globe. It's a button at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that globe, you can switch and toggle between English and French. Our panelists will be speaking in their preferred language, a mixture of both French and English. To view the ASL and LSQ interpreters, please make sure you have your video set to the gallery view. Because our session is 90 minutes, the ASL and LSQ interpreters will be working one at a time and will come on screen to switch off briefly throughout the session. If you would like to ask a question in ASL or LSQ, please let us know in the chat box so we can enable your video. Today, we have an exciting announcement about the Healthy Communities Initiative, followed by a panel discussion. To begin, we want to take a moment to acknowledge and reflect on the land we reside and work on. I am pleased to welcome grandmother Pauline Shirt. Pauline was born and raised in Saddle Lake Reserve, Alberta. She has been a teacher and a lecturer from the Indigenous community since the late 60s and is a member of the Three Fires Society and the Buffalo Dance Society. She founded the Wandering Spirit School and the Red Willow as part of her work to enhance the lives of the Indigenous community in Toronto. Pauline currently serves as a mentor to many Indigenous youth and young families as an experienced and trusted grandmother. Welcome, Pauline.
Good afternoon. Thank you for Miigwech for the beautiful introduction. And it's great to be alive. It's life is so beautiful and all that, and that's what I'm here for to help put this our minds together. And I am holding some tobacco in my hand. That is the spiritual connection to each and every one of you, okay? Because you are a spiritual human being in here and on Turtle Island. And I am, my name is Animki Kwe, which means Thunder Woman, and I am of the Red Tail Hawk clan. I'm a Cree great grandmother from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Saskatchewan. That's where all my relatives are from. And also, but I've been here since the 60s, and I have my family here. And I'd like to say in my language, a welcome, a beautiful, beautiful, invocation. And I'm going to say it in my language, which is the Cree. I am a Nihio Squale, which means I am a Cree woman, and I have been in I hold a fourth degree in the Three Fighters Society, and I am also one of the leaders and chiefs of the Grandmothers Council in our society. So I'm also the chief of the of the Buffalo Dance Society. So as we grow older, we have a lot of titles and we have a lot of responsibilities. That's why, as I hold this tobacco in my hand, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be asking the great ones, our spiritual consultants from the spirit world, and my helper here, Migaze, she's here. She's here. I'm here with her, and she's going to be listening to each and every one of you. And what she's going to do is she's going to, whatever you have in your beautiful mind, your beautiful body, your beautiful spirit, and your emotions, she's going to collect that after and send it into the universe. Okay, so I say bonjour. The way am I going to do? That means hello, my relatives, and my relatives are our relatives are also the birds, the animals, and the insects, and so that we're all related. We're all related. So, as a Nihil Square from Turtle Island, I am going to ask those spiritual consultants to come in here. Aham, bonjour. Anim ki kwedish ni kas ki bala saying it to them. Aham, que je mane do, me de mane do. Aham, yaguma sema. Ihmi takuk, ihmi yak, oh ya, kigawi no, ego hu kika kio ga music, kemusum da wak, ego mina, aha me ko de ka kio, ka pi wichi kuya ke kuta. Ka tipa ta ya kik, aha, ego ti hu ma, aha, e tipa ta ka wa ban no kisika sut, kapitu te tuta, kapik snah ya huta, kapik si tuskagu ya, aha, isagi ha ya hamstahe. Ahamin tumaya huma utse sema kapito tetuta. Ahame kwa huma que je mane do kasawaim kuya kasawaim ka kiyo ka kiyo sawaim nan musum nan timagi tau nista aham nista maki kwe nista skate naman maga nista yaguma da tuske win nista Witsi hen, koya sugik, aham, koyas, iksisi kas chakuma, aham, uta, Community Foundation, Canada, kisi kas chik, ekuta, umaka saway ma chik, kaknaway ma chik, koyas kapik square chik, aham, kwahuti, awin ekuti kakanaway ta, aham, ekuti hanma, aham, ekuti hanama, sawan anok, kwa, aha migize ikuta hiwiche hat ikuta kakio ikune aha se mahi miaya kapiwichi hitu kapiwichi ku yahuta kapikita magi tagu yahuta aha koyas ia guare ka wichi ku ya aha me ko huma ekuta huma ihaya ia kapito ted kapia ya kapiwichi ku ya kaki yahuta aha e ko hawino muti Aham ekuti. Aham kakanawapa ta ekuta. Aham ekuti hanma. Aham ekuana nikan biyan nandok. Aham ekuta ekuta. Pasquamus tosisi kataya. Koyas kamam teneta yaguma miopamaris so win kahkio. Ah kio kamam teneta mahkahkio. Kawapahtamah pokikoi kapihtamah pokikoi kamio pikskuya. Aham kamio pamuhtia kahkio ma. Aham Witsihinan, sawaim nan isanan. Kamaskumam teneta mah koyas, aham. Kinanaskumten, kwahuti, aham. Ekutihan mah, awin ekuti, kakadawehta, aham. Ekutihan mah, aham. Ekutihan giwe din andok ekutahan mi kanawehta. Kwahawina, ekute, kapi kiwete, kapi tuhta. Ikitawan sisot, aham, aham, ekutahan makwa, aham, ihpiki wet, miopemata suweni, piaya, puki kwe, ihpimikuya, aham, iwi hachimut, aham, kahkio puki kwe, ki kwayan makantawi tamahikuti huche, aham, Keshemanidu sawaim nan koyas kahkio nistanan ikunihu ke kahkio kamiyo paichik kamiyo paya kake kasawaimia miyo mam tenetsekan hahan ekuta kahkio ko homagax kaguya koyas kamiya wen kahkio hintawimat ke kahkio utawasim suawa usawe kahkio wistawa aham huchapano wa kahkio isino kuma aham kigawina waski ekuta kai aya kamiyo paya kake kahkio aham sawena kwahwino multi kayat aham kakanawapan koyas ya huapahta mahpoki aham bedegi sesiga so aham nanas kumau numusom na ni hiya knawemia hisawemia kake aham witsihindan kwahmina aham nanas kumstahe awina maguta humuta kaganawehta kakio igawena oski kisiga sot ya kwan kikawinaw kahkio tawasimsa uta ipituhtiet mihchet ipituhtiet sakuta kanawapam hekunek kitawasimsak aham kusmak mina aham negawinan kwan sawim nan listanan sawim nan kanawapam nan koyas sawim nan Keshe aha, nide manidu, nistanan, witsihindan, nistamaki kwing skating makuma, sema, yaguma, aha, itapugi tamanka kenista, yogunista, aha, kanawapan now, koyas kamiyo paig, aha, mekuta, taway maganak, kakio, kamiyo paig, uta, ipiachimuik, aha, kakio, tenaskum now, how no missionary shall money do, how no way missionary shall money do, how no way missionary shall money do, how no way missionary shall money do, and again gonna can ask them to stay. What I have said is I have called in all the four spiritual helpers from all the four directions, the birther, the sustainer, the strengthener, and for us, to have great health, the healer, and also our grandfather, the son. We are very thankful that we can walk, we are healthy, we are happy, we have our good life together, and we are gathered in here exuding all the things, all the great things from within our minds and hearts, and so we will all have a good life and help each other out. And we call this Turtle Island. And I ask grandma and all the grandfathers, I hey Mr. I say thank you, me question, to them. And also you do the same thing too. Ask them, because so this is all, this is what I want to say to each and every one of you. Be happy, be thankful for that life, be grateful for this life, be grateful, and ask that what we're enduring right now, it will go away, it will go away. But we have to think about ourselves. This is what is happening with us in here in this life. So I say miigwech to each and every one of you, of all creation and all that. And also, but also the last thing I'd like to say is the second moon in creation, don't forget her. She's Makwa, Geestis. She's the bear moon. She was you know, in the spirit world, fasting. And you know what she brought in is that new life, that good life. And that's what you're be talking about here, that new life, that good life, encouraging each other that there is, a beautiful life ahead of us. Okay. So I thank her. As you look up into the sky world, look at those grandmothers who come here and help each and every one of us. So I say miigwech to each and every one of you for everything. And you have a great meeting. Aha. Hi.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you for sharing your beautiful words and reflections with us today. Thank you very much. At this time, I am pleased to welcome and introduce Parliamentary Secretary Andy Fillmore, who is the Member of Parliament for Halifax and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. He has a background in urban planning and design and was Halifax's first manager of urban design. He co-founded the Halifax Strategic Urban Partnership in 2010 and won a National Urban Leadership Award in 2012. He has brought his knowledge and passion about urban planning to his position as Parliamentary Secretary and helped to spearhead the Healthy Communities Initiative. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and welcome everybody. And if I can start by just saying to Grandmother Pauline, thank you so very much for starting us off in a good way today. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde, and thank you for tuning in for this extremely exciting announcement. Je m'appelle Andy Fillmore et je suis le secrétaire parlementaire de la ministre de l'Infrastructure et de la...
My name is Andy Fillmore, and I'm Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Infrastructures and Communities in Canada, Catherine McKenna.
And I have the great privilege of serving the constituents of Halifax as their Member of Parliament. Je suis heureux d'être accompagné aujourd'hui par mon ami et mon collègue, Catherine McKenna, la ministre de l'Infrastructure et des Collectivités du Canada. I'm pleased to be joined today by my friend and colleague, Minister Catherine McKenna, Canada's Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. And as you know, we're also joined today by Andrea Dix, President of Community Foundation of Canada, and Mary Rowe, President and CEO of the Canadian Urban Institute. As we begin today, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining today's announcement from Halifax, known to the Mi'kmaq people as Kjipuktuk, or Great Harbor. And Kjipuktuk is in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, where we are all treaty people. Now, this last year has been an incredibly difficult year for Canadians from coast to coast. The pandemic has impacted the lives of all of us, our healthcare systems, our economy, and throughout this, and this time continues, it continues to be difficult. Countless Canadians have stepped up and come together to keep us going. And with that, I want to begin by thanking all of our frontline workers here in my community, but across the country, for your critical and selfless work. Thank you. The pandemic has been profoundly disruptive to the way that we live, the way that we interact with our family and friends, the way that we work and learn, and the way that we experience our communities. Our communities, big and small, rural and urban, on reserve, off reserve, have been the glue that has helped us all together through this year. And we all know that when we support and care for our neighbors, we're all better off. But of all the COVID-19 impacts we've experienced, few have been as readily recognizable or visibly jarring as how quickly the pandemic emptied our streets and public squares in cities and towns across the country, as Canadians dutifully followed the advice of public health officials and stayed home to save lives. And yet these spaces are vitally important to our communities, even in a pandemic, vital to our own health, including the maintenance of our mental health through the benefits of social exchange, and vital to the health of our local economies that rely on people frequenting our shops, our restaurants, our cafes, our galleries, and so much more. But you know, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. And the opportunity that Minister McKenna and I saw, and that community builders across Canada saw, was to empower Canadians to come up with their own place-specific solutions to these challenges. Solutions that allow community members to live and play and work in ways that are safe and healthy and inclusive, and in ways that lead not just to our economic recovery, which is so important, but also in ways that bring joy back to our streets and help to lead our social recovery. And so now, to present the announcement we've all been waiting for, it's my great privilege to introduce my colleague and friend, Canada's Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, Catherine McKenna. Catherine, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Andy. Andy is an awesome parliamentary secretary. He is a municipal planner, his background, so he has a lot of experience that I've really been able to benefit from. I want to start, first of all, by thanking grandmother Pauline Miigwech. That was a beautiful way to open today's incredible announcement. And also, I get a great deal of pleasure looking at the chat. So I see some people from Hamilton, that's my hometown, but folks from all over, from different traditional territories, from different places. And Greg McMeekin, I know someone will follow up with you. I see that you were deaf and that you unfortunately can't access this. So to the Community Foundation, track down Greg McMeekin. I am just so excited about this announcement. I'm going to go back a bit in time, which I think we have all been going through a very hard time. I think it's fair to say, and it's been particularly challenging for essential workers, for seniors living in long-term care homes, and a number of folks. And I think that when the pandemic started, I said to Andy, what can we do that would help lift spirits? What can we do to enable communities across Canada to come up with ideas to help folks live through COVID-19 and thrive through COVID-19, smaller projects that would make a difference? And I think that's what I've really learned. Alors, moi, je suis la ministre de l'Infrastructure et des Communautés. Alors, c'est le titre communauté que je pense.
So I am the Minister of Infrastructures and Communities, which is very important. That's what we see today, because we all live in communities, and communities are essential during this pandemic because our communities are everything. We can't travel, we're staying home. Therefore, anything that is community related is important. We see our essential employees of essential services. We acknowledge and recognize the work they're doing. Perhaps we have never known this beforehand. We recognize the most vulnerable within our community. We recognize the extent of the importance of nature. I love nature. We also recognize the importance of our small businesses. Alors, je suis la ministre de l'Infrastructure et c'est un titre bureaucratique, mais je suis ministre également des collectivités et cette initiative est pour bâtir de nouvelles communautés. Comment faire cela? Par le leadership des gens au sein de la communauté, parce que vous le savez plus que moi, je vous vois tous partout provenant de diverses communautés. Vous le savez davantage, c'est vous qui le savez le mieux, et même Madame Dex, et vous connaissez les communautés de partout à travers le Canada. Vous avez réuni beaucoup de gens, et aussi à Mary Rowe, qui est la présidente justement de l'Institut urbain du Canada. Et c'est une composante très importante de tout cela. Alors, comment bâtir des communautés vivables, davantage en santé à court terme, mais il peut y avoir des occasions aussi à long terme. Et pour que vous sachiez, au sein de mon portefeuille, lorsque nous voulons voir ce que nous pouvons bâtir, nous regardons aussi les résultats. Et je suis une mère et je veux m'assurer que on détient aussi, qu'on obtienne de la valeur sur ce que nous créons. Alors, les emplois, la croissance économique et le changement climatique qu'il faudra lutter à la fin de cette pandémie, et une fois que la crise sera terminée. Alors donc, justement, pour réduire les émissions à zéro, il faut aider nos communautés. Et nous avons vu le mouvement Black Lives Matter. Et nous avons vu qu'il y a de plus en plus de Canadiens qui reconnaissent comment il faut bouger de l'avant par rapport à la réconciliation avec les peuples indigènes et autochtones. Alors donc, beaucoup de choses qui peuvent être bénéfiques à ce programme.
Peut-être vous voulez entendre qu'est-ce qu'on a à dire. You're probably pretty excited
So perhaps you want to hear what we have to say. Vous êtes emballés d'entendre nos idées. Alors, tous les organismes locaux, si vous êtes là, vous écoutez, peut-être que vous pouvez transmettre le message. Si vous écoutez plus tard, on vous demande justement d'aider à améliorer la vie de vos voisins, du voisinage et de passer à travers justement la COVID-19. Je ne veux pas émettre d'ordonnance, mais je peux vous dire ce que j'ai vécu dans notre communauté et à travers le pays, qu'il s'agisse de nouvelles, de bulletins de nouvelles, d'articles, de journaux et justement qu'il s'agit d'une piste cyclable temporaire. Et il faut encourager nos communautés à sortir, à faire des marches et faire du vélo. Voilà des occasions géniales pour que les gens puissent faire ça de façon sécuritaire et que les gens soient actifs. Et les jardins communautaires, je sais que les gens aiment beaucoup les jardins communautaires pour justement faire pousser leurs propres légumes. Et ensuite, des installations artistiques, de créativité dans les parcs. Et c'est une bonne façon de soutenir nos artistes. Et aussi, je sais que pour les points d'accès Wi-Fi, c'est un défi. Alors, et aussi la livraison sans contact de votre supermarché. Vous avez les idées, vous détenez les idées. Nous sommes très emballés justement de vous entendre et je vais aborder le détail un peu plus tard. Nous vous donnerons plus de renseignements et and for those communities.
Les communautés locales sont en première ligne face à la pandémie.
She's now speaking in French and the interpreter does not have the English button.
Les organisations locales, alors tous vous qui sont ici avec nous aujourd'hui, à proposer des idées pour améliorer la vie des quartiers pendant la COVID-19.
So to improve the life of neighborhoods during COVID-19 and this pandemic, whether it be pop-up bike paths, whether it be community gardens, and artistic creations outdoors or Wi-Fi hubs. And of course, Canada Healthy Communities Initiative wants to help communities, neighborhoods to be more vibrant and inclusive for today and tomorrow. Et il me fait plaisir d'annoncer que justement, l'initiative canadienne pour les collectivités en santé va interagir avec les communautés afin d'identifier.
Foundations of Canada has the expertise, a strong network of partners, including the Canadian Urban Institute, to serve the distinct needs of urban, rural, remote, and Indigenous communities across the country as we all continue to adapt to COVID-19. So today we're calling on all communities to come forward with your ideas. I want to be clear. We designed this program. It's intended to focus on smaller local projects that can get a big impact quickly to help with some of the local effects of the pandemic and really to help people survive and thrive through the pandemic. That's why the Government of Canada will provide up to $31 million to support community-led solutions and provide individual grants as small as $5,000 up to $250,000. Je veux être clair, nous avons conçu ce programme en mettant l'accent sur des projets locaux plus petits qui peuvent avoir un grand impact rapidement pour aider à atténuer certains des effets locaux de la pandémie. Le gouvernement du Canada fournira jusqu'à 31 millions de dollars pour soutenir ces solutions communautaires et accordera des subventions individuelles allant de 5 000 à 250 000 dollars. We want to help communities of all sizes in all regions of Canada. And the Healthy Communities Initiative has three main themes. One, creating safe and vibrant public spaces. Two, improving mobility options. 3, advancing digital solutions that will help us adapt to our new normal. As I said, we're talking about everything from more inclusive and welcoming outdoor spaces, Wi-Fi hubs, ways to safely reinvigorate shopping districts, local food distribution, cross-country skiing trails, you name it. The possibilities are endless, and I'm really putting it out to all of you folks. So put your projects up there. I want to see some exciting ideas. I see some cycling ones. I see some patios, active transportation. As Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, I'm responsible for funding a lot of infrastructure projects, from Victoria to Nunavik to St. John's and everywhere else. As a government, we're making historic investments in building up Canada and building back better, and the numbers can get actually quite mind-numbing, making investments in the billions of dollars. But I actually really believe, based on conversations that I've had with so many people, that even though this is a relatively small initiative, the Healthy Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, it can also have a really big impact. And I have to give a shout out. Like, I get a bit emotional because I see Canadians every day figuring out how to support each other through COVID, how to make lives better for each other, how to innovate, how to appreciate nature more. Hopefully we just, at the end of this, we remember that community is really what we make of it. It is up to us, all of us, to design incredible communities that serve the needs of the residents. I think that this is a huge opportunity. Hopefully it gives you a boost. It certainly gives me a boost. Moi, je suis tellement intéressée de voir vos projets, vos idées, vos solutions pour la vie, maintenant sur COVID-19, mais aussi dans le futur. At the end of the day, it's up to us. We have a choice to make. What kind of community we want to live in? Do we want it to be more livable? Do we want it to be more inclusive? Do we want it to be cleaner? Do we want it to drive us to net zero emissions and help us tackle climate change? Do we want to be supporting the most vulnerable members of the community? I say yes to all of those. Anyway, I just am really excited to be here. I want to thank the Community Foundations of Canada for bringing so many folks together. And once again, really looking forward to hearing your innovative ideas about how you're going to make life better in your community through COVID-19 and beyond. Merci.
There we go. Just struggling with the old mute button there. Minister, thank you. It's truly a fantastic day for communities across the coast. I'm just like you. I'm just watching the project ideas fly by, and I love it. This is everything that we hoped it would be. I mean, there's so many there, but community ovens, mobile art galleries. One from Halifax, outdoor music on the south side of the central library. They go on and on. I mean, the ingenuity is already extremely clear. The possibilities of this program are just as varied as the spirit and imagination, and as unique as the communities across this country. So we, as we launch this first intake of applications under the initiative, we're so excited to see what grassroots projects emerge. So keep those ideas flying. Look, before we get to the panel discussion, I would like to introduce Andrea Dix to come back to you, President of the Community Foundations of Canada, who's going to tell us a bit more about the Community Foundations of Canada and how organizations can submit their applications. So over to you, Andrea, as we watch these amazing project ideas fly by.
Thank you so much. They are incredible. I know we're recording, but I hope we're also able to capture the chat, because the ideas that are showing up here are, I think, exactly what we were all hoping for. So before I say a little bit about Community Foundations of Canada, I just wanted to extend a big thank you to both of you for this incredible opportunity that is being brought forward to Canadians, to your teams who have been working so hard to bring this to life. We're really, really appreciative and are delighted to have the opportunity to be part of it and to bring it into Canadian communities. So thank you. As we bring this to life, we also want to recognize that at Community Foundations of Canada, we will be working alongside community foundations. There's 191 of them across the country. We will be working with the Canadian Urban Institute and a network of other partners who have amazing expertise in building vibrant, equitable, and livable public spaces. As was mentioned already, we know that over the last year, communities have faced the challenges of the pandemic. They have felt the strain of living physically distanced lives, and they have witnessed the disproportionate experience and impacts of COVID-19. And during this time, the community foundations across the country, alongside partners like many of you, have been listening to and supporting the unique needs of communities. We believe that innovations and solutions are best found in community, by community. The chat function tells me that is absolutely correct. And so CFC is a pan-Canadian organization with a network that reaches coast to coast to coast, that has deep local roots and expertise in building communities where we all belong. And this belonging, this is what we believe is at the heart of the work that we want to do. And this is what we believe this initiative can help us to support. The Healthy Communities Initiative is a vital next step in our collective response to COVID-19. It will provide an opportunity to create the places and spaces communities need while strengthening our collective and individual belonging. Today, you have the opportunity to learn more about the program and the impact we all envision it will create in communities across the country. We are excited to see and already see the incredible ideas that are going to come forward through this program that will transform how we move, gather, and connect. So we invite you to go to healthycommunitiesinitiative.ca. I will say that again, and we will put it in the chat. healthycommunitiesinitiative.ca. Here you can learn all about the program. You can sign up for one of our upcoming events about how to apply, and you can start an application. So once again, that is healthycommunitiesinitiative.ca. And with that, I think it's back over to you. Yes.
Thanks so much, Andrea. That's wonderful, and thanks for getting the link out there. There are a lot of questions going by, details about eligibility and so forth. Folks will find the answers to all of those questions in the applicant guide that is at the website that you mentioned. So thank you for that. It's a great snapshot of how the Community Foundations of Canada is going to help communities across the country make the most of this initiative. Now we're going to move on to the next part of the program. I'm going to hand the mic over to Mary Rowe, President and CEO of the Canadian Urban Institute, who's going to facilitate a panel discussion about the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative and take questions from our participants joining us today. I'm going to be transitioning now from MC for this announcement to panelist, and I look forward to a great dialogue with all of you and with my fellow panelists on how this new initiative can help our communities slow the spread of COVID-19 and at the same time build those communities back up better throughout our economic recovery. So over to you, Mary, and thanks again to you, Community Foundations, for all your amazing work.
Thanks, Andy. I hope we can now call you Andy in this segment of the program. Your minister laid the groundwork of why this is such an important initiative for Canada, and just delighted to have an urban planner in a senior role in the government of Canada, and in fact one who did receive the Canadian Urban Institute's Urban Leadership Award 10 years ago. So Andy, it's great to have you in the role you're in and working with your colleague, Minister McKenna, to make this program happen. If I could ask my fellow panelists to join, that would be terrific. So put their cameras and their mics on so that we can see them. And we've got about 45 minutes here to just raise some of the kinds of priorities that these folks who have expertise in placemaking and in community building and understand all the potential that infrastructure brings us, to get us all thinking collectively about what the potential of this kind of a funding initiative is and what it could galvanize and support in local communities. communities. I've got to say that I'm Mary Rowe from the Canadian Urban Institute, and we've been doing conversations through the pandemic on various topics under our banner City Talk. And I don't think I've ever seen the chat blow up quite as it has today. So we always say, whatever you put in the chat stays in the chat, because we do archive these and we do publish them. So all of you that are madly trying to scribble to see about these great ideas that people are throwing in, don't worry, it'll all be posted and you'll be able to go back and look at it. And I'm with the minister and Andy, so impressed with the quality of what everybody's putting up there, and people that have projects already started, and it's tremendous. I'm the CUI is a national organization, but I'm here in Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit and Métis people from across Turtle Island. And I appreciate people on the chat acknowledging their experience too with the territories that they are in. And I would say that here at the CUI and people engaged in city building across the country have been struggling over months to come to terms with the legacies of exclusion and how we must do better, and the extent to which COVID has disproportionately affected communities of color, vulnerable communities, where I don't think where we have not been able to get the kind of engagement or servicing and infrastructure opportunities that this program we're hoping will unlock. And so it's a really important conversation to have. We always say on these City Talks, this is the beginning of a conversation. It's never the end. And I'm encouraging people to go to the website that Andrea just plugged, because you're going to see there are many, many, many programs, webinars like this, that will be able to answer your technical questions, and where you can start to collaborate. And I think this is what we're seeing here in the chat is one of the powerful things about this program is it's going to give you an opportunity to partner with people that maybe, or groups that you're not used to partnering with. And I think that some of our panelists are going to speak very specifically to that. So you know who Andy is. He's a parliamentary secretary. He also happens to be an urban planner. Jay Pitter is joining him, and Jay is an award-winning placemaker and an author. She has a practice on institutional city building projects and is focused on public space design and policy. She's pretty much coined the term forgotten densities. She's been a voice of conscience through COVID to continually remind folks where are the adverse impacts being exposed that existed prior to COVID, but COVID continues to expose them. And so she has a whole practice around mobility equity, gender responsive designs, and she's been a key advisor on the shaping of this initiative as an infrastructure and equity consultant. And so I'm going to go to her in 2 seconds, but not yet, Jay. I want to get all the bios out. Cliff Grant is joining us. He's with the Director of Strategic Relations with the Aboriginal Housing Management Association of BC. He's the one with that really great backdrop behind him that we've been teasing him about. He works on affordable housing and placemaking. And next to him, at least on my screen, is Will Prosper, who's a documentary filmmaker who I'm assuming is coming to us today from Montreal. Will, I'm assuming. We teased him about his action backdrop there. He's got people behind him. Will is the co-founder of Montreal Nord République, which is a citizens movement against police brutality and economic oppression. And he's also a co-founder of a social forum called Hoodstock. So he's been very active in merging the social implications of racism and what that looks like with how that interacts with the built environment. And then Marc-André Carignan. Marc-André Carignan, you're going to have to help me with the pronunciation of your last name, is a Quebec media contributor specializing in urban development and placemaking, very passionate, has all sorts of expertise about these kinds of platforms, speaks on Radio Canada on a broad range of topics. And so we're really appreciative that these folks came on today to give us their perspectives and expertise about why placemaking matters. I will say that for me, in my practice, running something like CUI, I am constantly reminded that the quality of our places, whether we live in a big urban center, a suburban community, a peri-urban community, a small town, or we're rural, this place that we surround ourselves with really matters. And we've seen it during COVID, and we're going to continue, obviously, to see it as we try to cope. So, Andy, I might go to you first, and I'll just remind people in the chat, great if you add comments and toggle to all panelists and all attendees. Otherwise, the panelists only see it. Great, because you can see people answer each other's problems over here. So it's great if you share each other's challenges to everybody, you'll get an answer probably from somebody on the chat. Andy, can we go to you first? Just talk to us a little bit about the genesis of this. What was, I guess, what's the impetus? What's made you and the minister decide to come up with this funding envelope?
Thanks, Mary, and hello, and thanks to all the panelists as well. It's wonderful to see you, and I'm honored to be in your company. So thank you today. So, you know, I spoke in my earlier remarks about the kind of visceral reaction to that really visible and jarring disappearing act that happened on all of our main streets and in our parks and everything. I mean, there are people here on this panel who have spent a life like me, trying to populate those places and trying to activate them and get people to be out in the world and interacting with one another. So it really was like a gut punch to see that happen. And the worst outcome I could imagine from the pandemic was that a year later, and by the way, this was back in probably April last year at the early inception stage, that a year from then we would wake up and find that our communities, the ground floor of them, was vacant, that the main streets there was nobody there, that the shops were papered over, that the parks were empty, and that everybody who needed to get a quart of milk was getting in a car and driving out to the suburbs to a big box multinational store and not supporting local farmers. And I mean, the potential for that kind of catastrophe and what it would mean for all of us was just immense. So when the team started to talk about what can we do quickly, and you may remember countries around the world started to respond quickly. The one in particular that really motivated Catherine and I was New Zealand's fund. I think it was for Healthy Streets for People, I think it was called. And within a week, we were on the phone with that Minister of Transport, picking her brain to figure out, you know, how she had done it. So that was really the goal. How do we bring people back to the streets in a safe way during the pandemic, so that they can not die of boredom or forget how to be with other people? And how can those activities support our Main Street local businesses and help the economy at the same time? So that was really where it all started.
Yeah, I remember seeing on Twitter a photo of the two of you hunched over your computer in the early days of Zoom with that minister from New Zealand, very excited that you'd had that conversation. So I remember it visually too. I think that, as you suggest, a year ago, who knew that this is what we'd be being faced with a year later? But I think that there's been a growing awareness that there were a bunch of preconditions that COVID has exacerbated. I called it a particle accelerator. Suddenly things that weren't working quite well enough in communities suddenly surface and become even more serious. And now we've got this moment where we have to address it. And I'm interested, if I went to Jay next and ask a little bit about that, because you've been a keen observer of this and a reporter of this, and as you see it in communities with your constituency. And if you could just share with us a little bit your approach as a placemaker about what is infrastructure? Why does infrastructure matter? And then I guess, how do you understand an opportunity to address equity potentially through a new approach to infrastructure?
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Mary. It's been such a privilege to be the infrastructure and equity lead on this particular grant. And when I think about infrastructure in this context, I think it's very important to note that the equity-seeking groups who've been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, interestingly enough, reside in communities historically harmed by or excluded from good infrastructure investments. And so I think that this particular grant is very exciting because it helps us to not only meet the moment, but also redress some of the historical harms. And so that combination is very exciting to me. Now, the term infrastructure is, popularly understood as the provision of things like roads and buildings and power plants. But in the last 20 years or so, we understand that infrastructure also vitally includes things like digital infrastructure. And we're seeing how the digital divide and digital injustice has really come to impact not just equity-seeking groups, but a lot of people across this country. And so I'm really pleased that this grant is also including a digital stream as well. And the other thing that is critically important to me as an equity-based placemaker is social infrastructure. So in the last several years, we've started talking about the importance of social infrastructure. And so what this grant does is it really melds these three forms of infrastructure so that we can respond in a way that is holistic, and also so that we can honor and bring together people doing place-based work across disciplines and many, many different approaches. So that's super exciting for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think both Andy and Jay are calling into question, it's not just what infrastructure is, but it's also what's the process to arrive at what gets created, and with whom are you creating? Are you co-creating? And Jay, you and I have talked before, and others there are lots of folks in the chat who are very familiar with the history of this in contemporary urban practice, where, over decades, highways bifurcated communities. They disrupted often communities of color. The bridges were put in without any kind of consultation, all that kind of thing. And this is a really profound moment, I think, for us in a country like ours, spanning such great distance, for the federal government to actually put out a challenge and say to communities, okay, folks, what do you need? How do you propose to work with each other to create it? And how can we as government enable you to do that in a new way and to address some of those conditions you just described, Jay? Marc-Andre, can I go to you next and just pronounce your surname for me so that I'm not totally embarrassed that I screwed it up. What is it? How do you say it? Can't hear you.
Carignan.
Carignan, c'est bon. Please speak. Vous parlez, merci.
Ouais, ben écoutez, c'est vraiment une
Well, listen, it's really a fine announcement here today. It's fantastic because I would say that generally speaking, communities currently are showing resilience in many respects to try to recover, to stimulate their economy in an attempt to re-socialize. And Mr. Fillmore mentioned it in the intro. I mean, streets emptied out, downtowns emptied out, and the extent at which people lost their references, their benchmark within communities. And one topic of conversation that we're holding in Quebec since the start of the pandemic is this issue of economic vitality, commercial vitality within various communities. We end up in locations where we have office towers are empty, places where students were normally part of an economic system, they're no longer there. Sectors are dying currently. We see commercial streets, boulevards, coming apart economically, whether it be through shutdowns of businesses and organizations. And this causes loss of employment, a great deal of precarity in terms of mental health. Mr. Fillmore again referred to this in his speech in terms of mental health. It's very hard for people because of the social phenomenon or lack thereof. And many initiatives in Quebec in the last year in downtown Montreal, I myself took part in some initiatives with various communities in an attempt to stimulate the Montreal downtown core, because I was working with in a partnership with the Festival Place in Montreal, which is the location that livens up the downtown core in terms of concerts and shows to try to make public spaces more vibrant. And the strategy that was adopted was to call upon artists who also are greatly suffering currently, unfortunately, because the cultural events, locations are all shut down. And so they were invited to try to invite visitors and to create safe hubs of socialization where we can exchange and get entertained and re-explore our downtown core within the perspective of mental health, and to also trigger mobilization by restaurants, our businesses that make our city more vibrant. And these artists They focused on their activities, on performances on the street. We called upon designers, architects, who are artists within our communities to design our urban setting. And so they learned to come up with public places and almost volatile, but they were playful, they were colorful for people to come in to snapshots, and with the local businesses supporting everybody and being supported. We needed exactly that over the past few months. We needed that, and we'll need that within the forthcoming months, because the festival place, among others, wants to relaunch an edition this coming summer in an attempt to re-stimulate the economy and bring back vitality and a vibrant approach for restaurant owners and businesses that really make our city vibrant and alive.
I appreciate that you just cited artists, because I'm going to go to an artist next.
J'apprécie que vous ayez mentionné
Because
les
I think
artistes, parce que
Will
j'allais passer à cela, parce
would
que je
say that
crois
he had
que Will va dire, je ne sais pas, je sais que vous êtes documentariste, et nous avons tous
have a sense that we have some artistic component capacity, but I actually know that there are people in this gathering that really and truly are crafters and artists. And what you just suggested is such an interesting point, which I wonder if Will would comment on. I again, one of these little lessons out of COVID is, I think suddenly everybody, even a small business owner, is saying, oh, I guess I'm a placemaker. You know, I don't know whether all of us thought about that. And Will, I'm wondering if you could comment on that, because you've had a number of lives, just saying, you've done a number of different things. And what's your perspective on this in terms of marrying your professional discipline, but your values and the interventions that you've been focusing on over the last little while?
Thanks for the question. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. I'm really glad to see what's going on with that. These grants that might be happening pretty soon. I'm going to speak in French as well, because I think it's important. So I'm just going to follow up on what Monsieur Carignan said. And first and foremost, that's not French, en premier. Mais j'aimerais saluer en fait le travailleur des organisateurs communautaires aussi, parce que je pense qu'à travers la pandémie, je regarde Québec a été frappé durement et très sévèrement. Et dans la communauté dans laquelle moi je travaille à Montréal-Nord, c'est l'arrondissement qui a été frappé le plus sévèrement aussi à travers tout le Canada. Je veux dire, paix à la mémoire d'un travailleur qui, Marcelin François, aussi, qui était préposé aux bénéficiaires, quelqu'un qui est venu à travers le chemin Roxham et qui s'est installé ensuite à Montréal-Nord.
And so he set up in Montreal North. He was one of the first few people who passed away. And also my godmother, who was a beneficiary attendant. They were all members of the Black community working, and who also part of a network in order to address different issues. And this COVID pandemic is one that was already present beforehand, because we had the systemic inequality. And when referring to the arts, and I want to get back to Marc-André Carignan's point, we're talking about reviving the arts in the downtown, but in certain communities in Montreal North, and the one that I work in as well, needs to be revived, and it has to be made more accessible, because we're talking about green spaces, and we have to focus on places where there are fewer green spaces in Montreal. We have to maximize those existing areas and underprivileged districts, and to maximize these locations. And I'm happy to hear that there's the, of course, the digital division. And we held a survey within a community to see who really has access to the internet. And we held a survey with half the population, and we found that 15% of people still do not have access to new technologies or the internet. And so we had a student that was completing her master's degree. She did her entire thesis on her cell phone. Just could you imagine the amount of work this required? And so the issues are major. And to hear that we'll have this type of support, I hope that it will support the underprivileged communities by setting up such programs. What have we succeeded in doing? Well, again, not only do we want to support the community that's greatly impacted, but to reduce the number of people impacted by this, but to overcome the issues related to systemic inequality that we're dealing with should have been done beforehand, because some have issues having access to health care, transportation, many issues. There are underprivileged districts, and And I think we should especially focus on this and to try to pull away and pull out of this crisis that already exists beforehand. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, as you suggest, it's a moment of reckoning around how these patterns have developed over time. And is this the moment? And what does the intervention look like to actually have a fundamental change? I mean, I know that a number of people on this call have been advocating for this for several months around now's the moment. Cliff, can we hear from you about, we started with Pauline talking and rooting us in place, and the Indigenous perspective is place-based, coast to coast in communities, and it was such a poignant way for us to begin. And you are in the housing provision business in BC, so you must be looking at the challenges of placemaking all the time. Can you reflect a little bit for us in terms of how you think these kinds of investments, how could they make improve the quality of the places in the communities in which you work and live?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just quickly, Cliff Grant from the highest land nation on the north coast of BC. Although I live, work, and play in the traditional territories, unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh communities. I'm very pleased, and thank you for having us to participate. We're just right now looking at it's called a community housing initiative, or the rapid housing initiative, and we're anxiously awaiting the outcome. That's a $1 billion investment. And I know some of the folks that are actually reviewing those applications, they're already at $5 billion worth of applications.
Asks, yeah.
So this is I think it's a really great start. But what this does is it allows us to look at the need, because with this project, we're going to receive huge amount of applications. Look at all the awesome ideas that are coming through on the chat. They're very innovative, very progressive. A bunch of them I haven't heard before. So it's going to lend itself to we can use this data to advocate for more of the same. There's a couple areas I want to comment on. One is, there's the cultural space. We have a lot of initiatives in the 41 housing providers across the province that actually provide that cultural space. Remember, a lot of our folks are coming from far and away to the urban centers for many reasons. Two of the main reasons are, one, lack of housing on reserve, and two, lack of the Economic Development Foundation. So they've got to go there for work and for housing first and foremost. Being far away from home, having that physical space, that infrastructure to allow them to practice cultural, relate back to their cultural identity would be great opportunities. And I see that coming out in the chat. The other one, it was mentioned several times, is the digital support. And this is a soft spot for me, because my background is a high school science teacher, and I'm thinking of all the children at home right now. And if your parents that do not have the wherewithal to homeschool their children and support them, how are they getting this done? One, do they even have hardware at home to accommodate that? And two, if they did, would they even have Wi-Fi? So I thought about taking this one step further, and it helps not just on the education front, but on other fronts as well. If there was a hub, if there was a way to receive digital information for schools or from schools, from teachers, etc. But in terms of being safe, being able to wire that from the hub to each unit within the building, providing that safe space. But that you can bring that even further. You can bring it to cultural events. You can bring it to teach community members on how to do a community garden. Different celebratory, events around the annual calendar. I think that's important, because we've got a lot of challenges in the Indigenous community that don't allow for a lot of different opportunities to experience that. So I think that would be a really good opportunity. One, on the education front, and two, on the cultural identity. Just in terms of the hardware and the infrastructure for buildings. The other thing was I spoke to was using this type of an opportunity, the information gained from this opportunity, to bring to the new construction of buildings, to build this into new construction and have this ministry actually support that if extra points were added to the construction of the building in the way they, in the RFPs, then it's more of a collaboration between ministries. A lot of even though I do housing, many of our projects are only as good as the wraparound services that support them. So I think this is just a great opportunity for that collaboration.
Yeah, something I'll go right to you, Jay. I'm just going to reflect for a minute on Cliff there, that the point you've made so interesting is, and we've generally agreed on this, haven't we, that there's no time for single interventions anymore. We're not just going to do one thing. We've got to do something that enriches a community, creates employment, creates better, gives us better climate resilience. All this notion we have to do multi-solving, and you've just raised that. We've got to create cultural space. We've got to create space for housing. Why aren't we doing it all at the same time? And the other point you just mentioned is, are we going to learn from this program and not just look at existing assets, but how do we think about future assets? Jay, do you want to jump in and comment there?
Yes, I just want to say that, we've talked a lot about how COVID emptied the street, and it did, but also it made people who are unhoused and street involved hyper visible. And so I just want us to be careful with our framing there. So some people went inside, people who were privileged enough to socially or physically distance, but also there are people who were hyper visible. And as we saw, if we're talking about Black lives harmed during the last year, harmed, taken, executed. We know that women working in the informal sector, sex workers and other types of women, became hyper visible during this crisis as well. We know that young people exiting the foster care system. So I just bring this to the fore because as we move forward with these interventions, we do not want to be building on top or around these individuals. This is a moment to actually look people in the eye and work in deep collaboration with them. The other thing that I just want to say that is critically important, and we don't talk about this a lot, but infrastructure also is tethered to stories and intangible histories, meaning stories, celebrations, tragedy, all of those things. So it's so important for us to understand the stories of the places where we're going to intervene, right? Like everybody should do due diligence to really dig into that story to make sure that we're walking alongside community and not agitating, again, past harms and past inequities that are literally and quite metaphorically cemented in our foundation, right? So I just wanted to bring that to the fore as well, that some people are struggling with not seeing friends and neighbors on the streets, and some people are struggling with being far too visible during this time. And so we need to proceed with great nuance and sensitivity and sensibility.
Yeah, I mean, you're sort of speaking to a question I want to ask everyone here, which is, are there some principles or some values that you would encourage all the people on the chat and anybody that's applying for this program? What would you encourage that they keep top of mind? And Jay's just suggested, if you do no harm, make sure you're working alongside and with communities. She's also highlighting that there are different constituencies for whom place matters, including people that live on the street. And I would really hope that we're going to see some really, really fabulously important and effective proposals come out of the constituency that works with the homeless people. And I hope I hope that comment you just made, Jay, will spur some folks to think about that and think about the interventions that could be much more supportive of those vulnerable populations. If we were to think about principles, can I ask you, Marc-André, do you have a few that you would throw out? I'm going to ask each of you a couple of principles that you would keep in mind and urge others to consider.
Oui, effectivement, je suis tellement d'accord avec le commentaire de Jay, là, vraiment. Je pense que c'est important de le spécifier. Je pense que c'est un peu la force aussi de ce programme-là. Quand il disait, il faut concevoir avec les communautés, il faut concevoir Oups, excusez-moi, j'ai une traduction dans l'oreille.
Yeah, I think we're all coping as best we can with not a perfect translation system. So Marc-Andre, you carry on in French and we'll catch up. Carry on. We'll all, and then I'll get you to repeat it in English if we need you to. Go ahead.
Bien, voilà. Non, mais ce que je disais, donc Jay était vraiment sur
What I was saying,
j'adore
Jay
son
was really
commentaire
on the
parce
mark, and I
qu'effectivement,
love
je
her
pense que
comments because
ce qui est
indeed,
important, puis c'est la
I
force un
think
peu
what's
de ce
important,
programme-là,
and
c'est
this
un
is the
programme
strength of this program.
s'adresse aux
This
communautés
is
et
a
qui de mieux que
program
les communautés elles-mêmes
intended for
pour pouvoir
communities, and
créer
who
des
better than the
programmes qui
communities
vont leur venir
themselves
en
to be
aide, qui
able
vont s'adresser à
to
leur
create
population,
programs that
qui
will
vont
assist
être à
them, that
l'image
will address their
finalement
population and will be
de
to the
leurs
image
besoins.
of their
Parlait
needs.
des
And
gens qui étaient invisibles, qui sont devenus un
mentioned
peu
those people
visibles
who
ou
were
vice
invisible who
versa.
became visible or vice
Elle a tellement
versa.
raison. Un des
And
grands
she is so
sujets
right.
qu'on a
One
adressé
of the
durant la
major
pandémie ici au
topics that we
Québec, c'est la
addressed
question de
during the pandemic in
l'itinérance des
Quebec
sans-abri.
was the
C'est un
issue
enjeu qui est
of
très, très,
the
très discuté
homeless.
parce que
And
généralement,
this
c'est une
is an issue
population
that's
qui est très
greatly addressed
vulnérable.
and
Elle
discussed
l'est
because this
encore plus en ce
population
moment.
is
On a vu cet
greatly
été
vulnerable, even more so at the moment. And
parler
we've seen it. And
villes
you spoke,
prospères, là, des milieux qui ont été touchés à
of
Montréal-Nord.
prosperous
On a vu des
places and
campements
those who are less
apparaître, des gens qui
prosperous,
n'avaient plus de
and
domicile à cause de la
places
pandémie
like
ont
in
perdu
Montreal
leur emploi
North.
et se
I
sont
mean,
retrouvés
because of
dans
the
des tentes
pandemic,
à
people
l'extérieur,
ended
dans des
up
campements
with
à
no home.
Montréal-Nord,
They lost their
Vasse,
job. They ended up in
Montréal, un
tents
peu partout sur
outdoors
l'île. Donc, c'est
and pretty much
extrêmement
everywhere on the island of
préoccupant. On a
Montreal.
vu des
And
sans-abri,
this was very much of a
un
concern.
qui est
We've
issu des
seen
Premières Nations, qui est
a
même décédé dans une toilette chimique à
a
Montréal
homeless
durant la nuit
person
parce que c'est
who
l'hiver, les
passed
conditions sont
away, and
extrêmement
he
difficiles et il y a un
was
couvre-feu au Québec
indigenous,
et
and
lui
he was
n'avait pas
found
d'endroit où
dead
aller et
in a
donc est
portalet, and he had
décédé
no
seul
place to
dans une
go.
toilette chimique. C'était
And he
horrible
ended up in a
comme
chemical
situation.
toilet
Et
and
donc, il y a
passed
tout ce
away in
défi
there. It's
justement de mieux
horrible as a situation.
accompagner
And
ces
this
personnes-là qui
entire
sont
challenge
particulièrement
to better
frappées par
support
la
and accompany
pandémie
these people that are
et de les
especially hit
accompagner
hard by
peut-être
the
justement
pandemic,
avec le type de
and
programme
to
que vous proposez
support
aujourd'hui
them,
pour
accompany
bâtir
them
des
with this
espaces qui
type
sont
of
beaucoup plus
program to
inclusifs,
build
qui sont plus
spaces that are far
sécuritaires,
more
où on va se
inclusive,
sentir finalement
safer,
accepté par la
where
société
one
et
will
non pas
feel accepted by
repoussé par la
society
société.
rather
Et
than
peut-être
being
que le
cast
fonds
aside by
présenté aujourd'hui
society.
va
And
permettre justement
perhaps
des
that
initiatives
the
créatives
fund
avec des
presented
organismes,
today will
avec des
present
architectes, avec des
something
artistes pour leur
proactive
venir en
with
aide, étant donné que
architects,
c'est une
with
population
artists,
qui, oui, effectivement, est
with
souvent très marginalisée
participants
et
that will
malheureusement, l'itinérance
support
est en
these
croissance dans plusieurs
marginalized
villes canadiennes.
populations. And
Et oui, je
unfortunately,
pense que
homelessness is prevalent
pour venir
in
en
many
aide, il faut
Canadian
construire des
cities,
espaces plus
and we have
inclusifs,
to
comme le
help
disait
out, and we have to
Jay
create more
juste avant
inclusive
moi.
spaces, as Jay said just before me.
Yeah, I think you've just raised another point, which is, and I hope that people in the chat are hearing this, reach out to planners, reach out to designers, reach out to all the other folks that
Il faut parler aux concepteurs, les gens qui peuvent vous soutenir dans vos idées, vos propositions.
Making sure that we're doing holistic kinds of things. And as Cliff just highlighted, the Rapid Housing Initiative has $1 billion, and he knows there's already 5 times that request. So this is, you're taking your initiative that you've got $31 million to work with. It's a modest amount of money, but the potential you have to create something really, really unique that could then inform public policy and inform subsequent investments, inform new construction. Will, any thoughts from you on principles? What would you like folks to have top of mind as they think about how they might approach this?
Thanks for asking that question. I'm just going to transition to French so people get ready for the transition. So I'll just let you know in advance. Moi, je pense qu'il y a plusieurs choses qui peuvent.
I believe that many things could be done. 2 issues that are key, that are primary. The first, if I look at what we're doing in Montreal North, we're completely overwhelmed right now, thoroughly overwhelmed. We distribute laptops to have access to digital platforms. We support these families towards digital literacy, and same thing, I mean, throughout other issues in schools. And we're holding surveys to discover the reality of our population. This is a type of initiative. These are surveys that we hold in blocks to determine the needs, the true needs of the population. What we've come to realize is that many people within the population don't even know what organizations are into. And so there are communications issues that have to be worked and built into this. And this is the type of activity for organizations and communities that are racialized, and there's a big burden on their shoulders. I think there are many people who don't have that weight or the certain burden that people within our community are bearing. I think a support for accompaniment for these organizations, and to bear in mind that those who work in those areas is how might I help? How might I support these organizations throughout these various areas to relieve the burden, to take it off their shoulders? And I think this is extremely important to take into consideration for all those listening, and also to increase youth participation, because through this opportunity, people who are impacted considerably, significantly. And when I look at the curfews in Montreal North and the service available for the youth population is the police. It's the only intervention they'll have. I mean, for citizens, it's a police that intervenes after 8 p.m. That's all we got. And that's a problem. That's an issue as well. And we have to make it such that youth will participate, be part of the process. It's an opportunity. It's a golden opportunity for them to develop leadership and to see what the reality is and to work them into the process. I think this is something that should be maximized.
Yeah, Andy, I want to just bring you in for a second, then I'm going to come to Cliff and then finish with Jay. Andy, you're hearing from your fellow panelists here a real call for this program to reach out to what we often say the unusual suspects, but it's not the best term. You know, folks that are not always engaged by these programs, don't that would so greatly benefit from these kinds of interventions. So can you comment a little bit about the kinds of principles that you think about in your role, but also from your perspective as representing Halifax and Atlantic Canada?
Yeah, sure. Well, right off the top, I mean, this is why Jay has been such an invaluable part of the team with Community Foundations of Canada and helping to develop the applicant guide and the equity lens, Jay, that you provided for us as well. You know, when you're, let's say you have the example of a business improvement district and the membership is panicked and worried and they're struggling desperately to figure out solutions. The first thing that they're going to think of may not be some of the things that we need to be thinking about, and that is this idea of inclusivity. So that is highlighted, underscored quite bold, in relief, I would say, in the application process. The two that I mean, first of all, my first principle would be engagement, but other people have already made that point eloquently, and I won't repeat it. I'll just agree. But the two that I would talk about would be inclusivity and kind of a climate lens. So we've now talked about the inclusivity piece, but the climate lens, you know, when before coming to my last job before coming to this one, I was involved in the leadership of a provincial crown corporation called the Nova Scotia Waterfront Development Corporation. And if anyone's ever been to Halifax, we run the boardwalk there and we rebuild it. And I would often get comments from people who were visiting from away saying, geez, it's kind of quaint, you know, it's all made out of the pressure treated lumber. And, you know, when I go to Vancouver, it's concrete and steel and stainless steel. But that was very intentional in Halifax, right? That's Nova Scotian hemlock that's grown locally. It's milled by Nova Scotians. When a storm action hurts a wharf, it's rebuilt by local people with local intergenerational expertise on building wooden wharves. So those are some intentional. The same thing applies exactly to building sidewalk patios for restaurants on a main street to get away from all that crummy Home Depot steel and tiles and just use what you have at your fingertips in your local community using local talent. So those are big ones for me.
Yeah, it's you're really concretizing the idea of asset-based development. So look at what the vernacular is, what have you got at your disposal, and then be able to take it from there. Cliff, what principles would you want applicants, people developing proposals, to keep at top of their mind as they proceed? What would you suggest?
After listening to Andy, I'm missing the lower deck and in Halifax right now. So maybe more discussions at the lower deck might bring upon and have those discussions with ministers, which is one of my principles. I work in housing, but we've heard from how many different innovative approaches did we hear that actually include other ministries? There's housing, infrastructure, and communities. Poverty reduction, reconciliation, social development, and innovation, municipalities. I think it's a really good opportunity. Again, when we talk about housing, it's not just about putting a roof over their heads. There's all the wraparound services, initiatives like this, fantastic opportunities, but to live and learn from them. The other one was mentioned before, and it's always happened, and I've always worked in in supporting Indigenous initiatives is that many times you've heard the adage, if you build it, they will come. But that's always not the case, because you could be building something that doesn't make any sense to those that are going to be actually utilizing whatever initiative that you're building. So I always say, bring the community to it and listen to them. I don't know how many ideas came out of this chat watching over the last hour or so, but there's some fantastic ideas coming from community, and we should be really, really listening to that. I'm a voice for the urban Indigenous community. But if a ministry comes out with a program, they're not speaking to the people who actually utilize that opportunity. They need to come to us who speak on behalf of them, because we know how to reach out to them. We've got that experience. We already have that relationship, and we could bring forward ideas that actually work for the few dollars that we actually get to build, innovative units and provide these types of opportunities. Thanks.
Thanks, Cliff. Last couple of comments to you, Jay. Principles, what do you think folks should be keeping top of mind as they start to embark on imagining how they might engage with the program?
Well, Mary, we talked about systemic marginalization and inequity quite a bit during this conversation, and I'm pleased about that. It is also true that one of my foremost practice principles is don't empower people, people are powerful. And so in going forward with this grant, as we think about supporting communities, we want to use the term earlier, an asset-based lens. So we want to partner in ways that are respectful. We want to partner in ways that recognizes different forms of power, and where we combine our power together. And so I think that's a big principle for me. We're not just looking at solving problems and looking at needs, but we're also really looking at how do we become stronger together, working collaboratively? How do we leverage each other's strengths and wisdom? How do we work centering kindness and relationships across difference as the fuel of this work? So money is one thing, but if this funding does its work, we will not only build infrastructure, we will build understanding and relationships right across the country. And that's why I'm super proud to be a placemaker. So that's what I'd add.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, on that note of kindness and of the moment that we're in, everybody, and I appreciate the empathy that everybody on this call has shown, that we have people across the country coming in. I love how Canadians always start by telling us what the weather's like. It's quite a panorama of weather in Canada today. It's just part of our DNA, but also that we've been sharing with each other our challenges and our experiences and things that we want to try to address and how and all that kind of stuff. So we will absolutely in this program double down on making sure that you're as connected as you possibly can be. You can learn from each other. And as Jay suggested, it's not just about the money, it's about what this infrastructure and what the process of creating this work is going to enable between us. Because urbanism is for everyone and we're all in it together through COVID. So I just want to acknowledge we have a lot of partners working on this project, and I appreciate that the federal government was amenable to that kind of a collaborative approach, and Community Foundations is leading this process with us at CUI, and then many, many other partners that have come in. And over the next week or so, they are running webinars on specific aspects of what you might consider. So I'm encouraging you to go to the website, get the list. The first one is this Thursday, so come on back, same time. No, I think it's actually at noon Eastern, but more or less the same time, midday, to learn about asking all those technical questions. Those of you that just can't wait to ask technical questions, that's your chance. Some of it will be in the applicant guide, as Andy suggested. But again, every time you engage, you meet other folks, you come up with great ideas together, and together we're going to, as Jay suggested, empower each other as we proceed. So on the 12th, Park People's doing something. On the 16th, the National Association of Friendship Centers. On the 17th, 880 Cities. On the 18th and 24th, Vivonville on Quebec. On the 19th, the ICLI Group, International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. And Mars on the 22nd, February 22nd, to talk about tech. And those partners are engaging, have been working closely with Jay and others to make sure that this program is as accessible as it possibly can be, as creative as it possibly can be. And let's not waste this moment. I wish I could spend all afternoon talking with you guys. You're so smart, thoughtful. And it just reminds me that there are things that we can do together to cope with this massive global event where we often feel helpless. A call like today, the program that we're hoping to you all to participate in, gives us a chance to remind ourselves that we can lock arms and see what we can do. So thank you, Andy. Thank you to the minister. And thank you to Jay and Cliff and Will and Marc-Andre, and to our patient interpreters and ASL people and the cats that have been making little appearances. I appreciate that. Thanks for joining us. This will all be posted. You can watch it again and again and again. And you can read that chat, which is going to be published as a book, I think, because of all the fabulous, there's another 100 messages that I haven't even opened. So thanks everybody for being so engaged, and we wish you a great rest of the day, and let's do some great placemaking, folks.